Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and apparently after some very odd technical difficulties where I was able to stream to Periscope about 40 minutes ago, but not to YouTube. I don't even know if it popped up, but when it did, I guess it stopped streaming me immediately. It's kind of ironic because we were talking about the internet going down, and actually YouTube down trended yesterday. It did go down in some places. As you guys know, I was cut off from another broadcast I had been doing on an update of the coronavirus, and we're going to do that broadcast too, I promise you. We're going to update everybody on what's going on, the expanded mortuaries. We're going to talk about Boris Johnson now, quote unquote, testing positive, what that even means, so much more later on. But what I want to focus on is this segment of Event 201. Now, this is the fourth video in a 5-video series by them. I've been breaking them down into 2 separate videos so we can maintain some kind of attention span and really go over the ins and outs, the parallels of the fact that a drill, a live exercise put on by Johns Hopkins University at the World Economic Forum with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation predicted in October of 2019 that a novel coronavirus would come from a pig farm in South America and basically decimate the globe and its economy, and how they would manage that. Not so much how you would survive it, okay? Not so much the human impact, but more or less the impact of global business and how the World Health Organization and the World Bank and the Chinese CDC and the American CDC and Marriott and Johnson & Johnson and ANZ Bank, I keep going, should react to this. A bunch of unelected bureaucrats, okay, and representatives of the military media industrial complex, NBC Universal also there. And when we get into this, I haven't watched this whole thing. As you know, I've been doing these live with you, but I have seen bits and pieces. And as you know, they put out fake news pieces. Now, am I allowed to call them fake news since they're, basically news created for a simulation? I don't know. Is it real news that I'm reporting on it? I would think so. But we live in such a weird, upside-down, Orwellian society. Who knows where this gets labeled? Well, anyway, in one of these news pieces, as you've known, they've kind of primed you through the first 3 videos of disinformation and how this is a created virus and how it might be, I believe they suggested the WHO or Big Pharma or the United Nations, all of which are getting power grabs from this, by the way. Like the World Bank guy just cannot hold his glee. Again, October 2019, novel coronavirus outbreak exercise. Okay? Well, this one's talking about shutting down the internet. And because of all this disinformation, this first news piece we're going to see when they get into the exercise. And that's really important because we've already had YouTube come out and say that they're going to take down videos that don't go against what? Their terms of service. And of course, YouTube is an extension of Google, is an extension of Alphabet, and is an extension of the technopoly. It's not a, everybody calls it a technocracy. No. Technopoly. You and I can't get in on it. All right. The middle class, the upper middle class, they've all been decimated by this financially if they were invested in the stock market. Even if they weren't, with all the shutdowns, things will never be the same. But we'll get into the actual impacts of the virus. And if you want to see the first 3.5-minute segment I actually did on this video originally that should have broadcast, it is over on Periscope. So we're trying it again. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share. And let's get into it. Let's start talking about Event 201.
Okay, we will now...
I want to stop this. Information dissemination discussion and scenario epilogue. This is, we're going to control the narrative. You never put us in power. That doesn't matter. We know what's best for you. And by now, if we haven't figured out that China's narrative of how many people died there isn't totally and completely fake looking at Italy, I mean, come on.
Advance 3 weeks to the 4th and final meeting of the Pandemic Emergency Board on December 18th, 2019.
Final emergency.
Okay, thank you for reconvening, and let's get an update from Dr. Rivers.
In the last 3 weeks, case numbers have continued to grow exponentially. We now have an estimated 4.2 million cases and 240,000 deaths. Almost every country is now reporting cases, and those who aren't may simply not have the resources to conduct surveillance. We don't see any change in the rate of rapid spread, and models estimate that we could have more than 12 million cases and close to 1 million deaths by mid-January.
So let's stop. By mid-January. Now, again, we don't know what the real China numbers are. Let's get that out of the way. And that's why should we trust any of the people up here? George Gao of the CDC in China is on this board. He's the one lying to your face. Stephen Rice, who's lying to your face, is on this board. Why do we trust them? And I'm not even saying trust the media numbers one way or the other that are out there. But something's happening, guys, okay? And I don't understand why it's these people that are making the decisions.
We're not sure how big this could get, but there's no end in sight. Financial markets are universally down by 15% or more on the year. Fear of a catastrophic pandemic and uncertainty about the capacity for governments to respond and remain viable are fueling investor uncertainty.
Let's stop with investor uncertainty, okay? Because we already know there was a great movement of a lot of the CEOs in big companies starting in November. I mean, there was a mass exodus before that, but starting in November all the way through February, we saw some big heavy hitters leave. And the insider trading that happened in the Senate, that's the tip of the iceberg. Those are the minions of the predator class. So now we're talking about what? Millions of cases globally. And now they're going to manage your life. They're going to micromanage your life based on a fascistic model.
We have called this meeting today because of major strategic problems around communication that are happening globally. And here's a media debate that just happened on air today.
Now here comes the fake commercial, okay? Now I want to say this again. When this hit China, how many American journalists went there and covered it? How much of a lockdown does a nation of 1.2 billion people have on information and the general populace? Remember, when you have 1.2 billion people and you have less reported deaths than Italy, a first world nation with 60 million people, something is afoot.
Alarming news emerging from social media companies today about the CAPS pandemic. Twitter and Facebook are reporting they've identified and deleted a disturbing number of accounts dedicated to spreading disinformation about the outbreak. For more on this, we go to our correspondent, Catalina Parks.
We have to delete accounts on social media. Now, what has Facebook already done? Anybody that posts anything that goes against the community standards there via COVID-19, what? There's now a grayed out thing. They say that whether this is true or not, and then gives you the option in a very small little box to actually watch the video or see the image. This is happening now in real time, okay? And don't forget, Zero Hedge had their account suspended for questioning whether or not this was a bioweapon on Twitter, and it wasn't until the mainstream media reported on that. And remember, now we do have China representatives, Iranian representatives, even some Italian representatives saying this may be a bioweapon. All right, so when is it okay to question things?
Chen, these accounts were created by several state-sponsored groups intending to sow political discord, and some individuals are seemingly seeking to gain financial advantages.
So let's stop. Number one, you have them kind of blend in this Russia foreign narrative where like, oh, Russia interfered with our election, Russia bots. They don't even have to say Russia. They just pile the fear on this, okay? Talk about disinformation.
Violence against healthcare workers and minority populations has been increasing. A recent riot highlights the real danger in these posts.
So now we're going to talk about riots and posts. What about the real riots that happened in Italian prisons? What about the fact that you can clearly see that we're trying to not have that happen in the United States by letting out thousands of prisoners throughout the country? LA County let out 1,700 prisoners the other day. We are letting out hundreds in New York. Think about that. So when we're talking about actual riots, and by the way, it does seem that there may have been another riot in China, I don't think it has anything to do with, basically bots created by nation states to sow discord. The amount of, horse manure that's peddled here is amazing.
Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of dis and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
Limited internet shutdowns are being initiated to quell panic. Not to tell you the truth, not to get things straight, to quell panic. Well, what if the truth causes panic? What if people don't like the truth? Well, I guess you just censor that anyway, huh? I mean, we didn't elect any of these people at the World Economic Forum we're going to see at their little table. But that doesn't much matter, does it, Bill and Melinda Gates?
Thank you, Catalina. For more on this, we are joined by experts on crisis communications and social media, Kevin McAleese and Sarah Lee.
Crisis communication.
To me, it is clear countries need to make strong efforts to manage both mis- and disinformation. We know social media companies are working around the clock to combat these disinformation campaigns. The task of identifying every bad actor is immense.
I mean, this guy's a bad actor for sure. But now when we're talking about bad actors, they don't have to be nation states. Remember that counterintelligence document I showed you? Counterintelligence 2020 to 2022? Where they took Iran, Hezbollah, ISIS, and they said, hey, let's include them with leaktivist, hacktivist, and public disclosure organization. Or individuals that have a certain ideology. Let's broaden it all the way. Signed off by Donnie J. Trump. If you haven't seen my work on the counterintelligence document, it's out there. You can read the PDF yourself.
And experts agree that new disinformation campaigns are being generated every day.
Oh.
This is a huge problem that's going to keep us from ending the pandemic.
And he's not lying. I mean, governments are going on huge disinformation campaigns every day. They are. Organizations like the World Health Organization and the CDC, they're taking part in disinformation campaigns every day. Every day. To quell that panic, they're allowed to. Because they're self-entitled. They run the show. They print the money. They fund the wars.
And might even lead to the fall of governments, as we saw in the Arab Spring.
Oh.
If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
If the solution is controlling and limiting access to information, that's the right choice. Don't worry about your liberties, your freedoms, your access to truthful information. We're going to decide for you. You're not even like a child to us. You're not even like a pet at this point. You're an ant to be looked down upon. And if I want to piss all over you from my high horse, because I think it's the right thing to do, that's what I'm going to do.
I agree with Kevin. This is a big problem and doesn't even account for the massive amounts of misinformation being generated by legitimate users about the pandemic. But it's not just trolls who are spreading the fake news. It's often political leaders themselves.
Oh, whoa. Now we can't even trust people in our government that might question the other government response. We can't have dissidents in our ranks. You know, right now that bill is being held up by one Republican that's supposedly a libertarian. I think it's Massey. And, everybody's going against him. And, Mike Lee, who was speaking out, everybody's going against him. So it's not just trolls and bots and nation states. Let's lump everything together. It's everybody who goes against what this panel of unelected pieces of human trash wants you to believe. That is the translation if you're not getting it.
Who's to judge what's real or not? Would we trust every government to separate truth from lies?
I think this is more than just keeping the bad information out. It's also about making sure real public health information reaches the public. News is found from outlets other than social media. News organizations, public health groups, and companies need to help people take the right actions to protect themselves by promoting accurate, real information about the outbreak.
So then why is it at every turn I see mainstream American media demonizing the hydrochloroquine and chloroquine? I'm not saying that would be my first choice. Why is it that I don't see the majority of mainstream media promoting the intravenous vitamin C injections that I would promote as something that we've already have a study on, that we know is not toxic to most human beings, that yes, is time consuming, but if we can save lives, why aren't we promoting it? Not about saving lives, about consolidating control for the predator class. Never let a good crisis go to waste, eh, Ram?
Okay, for more on this, we're going to get a briefing from our communications expert, Dr. Sell.
Global health experts have highlighted that dis and misinformation are wreaking havoc on the CAPS response.
Havoc.
Health workers are under attack in a number of locations due to rumors that they are purposely spreading the disease.
Now let's think about that. Come on. Come on. Again, they're always trying to shift the fear away from the unelected panel of billionaires and their representatives. Okay? Always they're so great. They're so good. Who here thinks that health workers would be spreading something they're getting sick from? I mean, that's already something they've discussed in this, not having enough resources. All right, and we have our first New York nurse, and he looked like, I mean, if he was 40, I wouldn't know it. Apparently only had asthma as his underlying condition. This is what I've been saying. And he was, basically on a ICU bed for at least a week, and he didn't make it, right? So again, they're promoting false problems to shift the blame, misinformation and disinformation.
And response efforts in many places have had to be suspended because of concerns around violence. Pharmaceutical companies are being accused of introducing the CAPS virus so they can make money on drugs and vaccines, and have seen public faith in their products plummet. Unrest due to false rumors and divisive messaging is rising and is exacerbating spread of the disease as levels of trust fall and people stop cooperating with response efforts.
Well, again, what kind of response efforts are we talking about? When you're talking about health workers, I don't think anybody is going to combat that. When you're talking about military on the streets, well, that's not very American. I'm sure there's a lot of other nations that might have a problem with that. When I no longer have a voice or any rights or the constitutional ability to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because there's some jackboot outside with a tank and an automatic weapon, well, that's a little different, okay?
This is a massive problem, one that threatens governments and trusted institutions. Polls have shown that mis and disinformation are ubiquitous. At least 90% of the public has been exposed to these messages. At the same time, misinformation messages come from a variety of sources, even government officials. And often governments are contradicting one another.
So let's stop. You notice that? We're going to decide what government officials from which governments we're going to believe. Now remember, who of these people promoted the most? Mother flippin' China. Who's really questioned the Chinese numbers? Nobody. No, it doesn't matter how many videos leaked out of people being brutalized and drug out of their apartments. Doesn't matter the NASA footage of over 60 million people being locked down in the shutdown of Wuhan. Doesn't matter they moved in Chinese Uyghur Muslim prisoners from the re-education camps to man 80-plus factories after the fact to get the supply chain moving in February. None of those facts matter because what we say matters. And we'll decide what governments matter. And we'll decide what government officials from those governments matter.
We know that social media is now the primary way that many people get their news. So interruptions to these platforms could curb the spread of misinformation, but could also limit access to information from legitimate sources.
Shut them down!
Health ministries around the world are attempting to combat mis and disinformation by amplifying public health messaging through social and traditional media. But they are being outpaced by false and misleading information.
like the stuff you
National
promote.
governments are considering or have already implemented a range of interventions to combat misinformation. Some governments have taken control of national access to the internet.
Think about that. Some governments have taken control to national access to the internet. We wouldn't understand what's really going on in first world nations if Italy had done that, if Spain had done that. Think about that. Instead, when things did leak out of China, did NBC Universal, show those videos to you? Did they try to get in? No, they're telling you in this freaking exercise from October 2019, we will decide who gets internet and who doesn't. We will decide who gets valid information status, right? Just like I'm not an authoritative media source according to YouTube. So when you watch this video, on the side, on suggested videos, it's not going to be my video. It's not going to be a Play Next. It's going to be something from Fox or MSNBC or CNN or some other flavor of authoritative source, the kind that this piece of human filth promotes in a social climbing predator class scheme where we are looked at as literal bugs. Doesn't matter if you're making 10K, 100K, or 10 million a year. The upper echelons do not give a flying F about you.
Others are censoring websites and social media content, and a small number have shut down internet access completely to prevent the spread of misinformation. Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests.
Arrests?
Other countries.
You could be arrested for putting something on the internet. God forbid you leak a classified document. Oh no. Well, then you're a public disclosure organization. You're an ideological person. Don't do that. Don't tell the truth.
Countries have taken a more moderate approach and have focused on promoting fact-checking efforts and working with traditional media outlets. Yet these approaches are limited in scope. Social media companies report that they're doing all they can to limit the use of their platforms for nefarious or misleading purposes. But this is a technically difficult problem, and false, misleading, or half-true information is difficult to sort without limiting potentially true messages. The bottom line is that members of the public no longer know who to trust.
What? What? Well, we know not to trust you. Why should we trust you? Most members of the public don't inherently trust politicians. Most members of the public don't inherently trust big business. Most members of the public don't think you're better than them because you're in some kind of pantsuit, lady. All right? I just want you to know that.
Both the misinformation and the measures to control it have led to a crisis of confidence.
Thank you, Dr. Sell. So here's the policy crisis for this meeting of the board. How can governments, international businesses, international organizations ensure that reliable information is getting to the public and prevent highly damaging and false information to the extent that's possible about the pandemic from spreading and causing deepening crisis around the world? How much control of information should there be? And by whom?
How about none, How about none? How about I'm a human being like you're a human being, and you don't get to know things that I don't know because you think you should be in control. But that's not what this unelected board of Davos minions is it? Is it? Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share, guys.
And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments? So, your views would welcome.
So I would start by pursuing where trust exists.
That's NBC, by the way.
In the ecosystem. Jane, in a prior meeting, mentioned that there's considerable trust by employees of their employer, and that's been borne out by our own trust barometer in the last several years, where it's extraordinary the amount of trust given to the employer. And coupled with that, in times of crisis, as we're living, the role of the CEO and the trust given to the CEO for advocacy and for advancement of accurate information is considerable. I would marry the business leadership of the employer with business leadership organizations, such as the BRT and like enterprises around the globe. But I also think we're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster.
A technology platform and not a broadcaster. Okay?
Is over. They, in fact, have to be a participant in broadcasting accurate information.
What does that mean? Well, if they're a participant in broadcasting accurate information, and somebody dares to say that Jason Bermas is not accurate, perhaps he doesn't get to post or broadcast via Periscope, via YouTube. I do have my backup platform, Rockfin. I know some of you guys are checking that out. We had an exclusive with the Conspiracy Farm over there, the full thing, not just 10-minute excerpt, over on Rockfin right now. But you get what I'm saying? They have to realize they're a publisher. They're a broadcaster. They have to censor everything we tell them to. I am NBC, and I am less relevant than ever without that.
And partnering with the scientific and health communities to counterweight, if not flood the zone of accurate information. Because to put the genie back in the bottle of the misinformation and disinformation is nigh impossible.
So flood good information. Okay, others, yeah, Jane?
Yeah, so can I agree with that? And my fact, it did come from the Edelman Trust Index, you'll be pleased to know, but also borne out by the work I've done as a CEO in my time. Can I also add that I think there are real technology opportunities here. I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on. But we also need to actually think about a technological answer to this. So there is work that's being done to actually create algorithms to sift through information on these kind of social media platforms.
So she's trying to say that that's not desirable. But the algorithms will fix it because the information we at the ANZ Bank Group and the Chinese CDC and Johnson & Johnson, that'll get through to the people. We'll flood it with them through algorithms. And we're already seeing that via Facebook during this real coronavirus outbreak, not the novel coronavirus outbreak from a pig in South America that they're drilling right here in October of 2019.
And I know that the Gates Foundation and others are funding organisations to work on things like this.
Oh, the Gates Foundation.
In order that people can actually have more confidence in the sources that they will use in any event. So I think both a detailed solution working with individuals, but then also thinking about technology is something we have to advance.
Asti.
So looping back into the trust barometer, last year in Davos it was released that trust in traditional media sources has grown, while trust in social media sources has gone down, specifically after the last elections in the United States.
But that's not true either. You know, that's projected. All right? No. Social media sources have not gone down. You've just made that narrative up, just like you're making this narrative up. The mainstream media has never been less trusted across the board by anybody who's thinking. Don't get me wrong, you still got those people that can't get enough Rachel Maddow for some reason. And don't get me wrong, you got those people that just can't get enough Sean Hannity for some reason. But there are plenty of people that do not take the mainstream media in any sense as gospel. That's ridiculous.
So I think one of the ways that we need to approach this is to make sure that we have the right representatives on traditional media networks in order to portray our side of the story and make sure that there isn't misinformation. I agree with Jane that shutting down internet is only going to cause extra panic and extra anxiety. In fact, that staff tells me places where internet access has been shut down, there's unrest growing. So we're not only dealing with this specific situation, but really people not trusting their governments at this point.
Why would you trust your government? When the people trust their government, you can trust there's going to be a lot of lies. Look at the Afghanistan papers. Look at how much they covered up about the Iraq war. Look at the lies they told you about Libya and Syria. Operation Timber Sycamore, anyone? Why should we believe our government? On any government?
So I think we really need to make sure, one, from a news perspective, that information is being disseminated correctly and that we have the right resources out there to provide this information. I also think that there is a good point in trusting in employees, in your employers. There are lots of communications channels. For example, during the Ebola crisis at Texas Children's Hospital, we had daily briefings with the CDC to tell us what the situation was. And because of the daily briefings, we used between the intranet, internal global communications, and town halls, we use those sources to be able to disseminate information and make sure that our employees knew exactly what was going on, coming straight from the source, whether it was from our CEO, our chief nursing officer.
Straight from the source. CEOs have never lied to their employees. They're making it sound like everybody loves their job and worships their boss. I mean, my God, on the lowest level, this is cartoonish. Yet these are the same people that are actually making decisions. The airline companies, okay, the hotel companies, the media companies, the CDC, the World Health Organization, the World Bank.
Is within the hospital.
Okay, Tim and Chris. Oh, sorry.
No, I think a complementary tactic, too, is to tap faith-based organizations and civil society and other institutions to recruit them also.
Yeah, let's get churches to lie.
To basically, almost at a grassroots level, continue to basically have the integrity of the information.
So I just pick up on the daily briefings or twice daily briefings. During H1N1, WHO filled the parking lot in Geneva with the global press and provided them daily updates on what was happening. And I think that's a manifestation of flood, meaning you have to lead and lead regularly. And I think in the terms of the content is what we know and point to where communications have actually been pretty good. I think we projected the exponential increase in this quite well, and therefore there's legitimacy to what's being communicated. And so be clear about what's being communicated that we know and that is right, but also be very clear about communicating what is absolutely wrong.
So let's stop this. This is the World Bank minion. We have to be clear about what's absolutely wrong, which goes against our globalist interests, which may question what's going on. After all, they've already heard in previous videos that this could be something for, vaccine companies or big pharma or world government.
And being clear about that. And then also being clear about uncertainty and that that's being managed. So I think in those three domains, very important not to deny, but to speak to them very clearly in the context of a daily briefing from, in this case, I can't imagine any other institution than WHO being the focal point.
I can't imagine any other institution other than the World Health Organization and the United Nations to give us the information we needed. Listen, they've already been called out. Remember in January? They were like, don't stop travel. That's ridiculous. That's bad. The same Muppet minions of that media, military, industrial complex run by the predator class are still running this actual show. That should alarm you. That is why I'm doing this series.
Martin and Chris, and then I'll come down this line.
Thank you. I fully agree that this is pure crisis communication, and crisis communication today, also social media is part of it. And just to limit or even stop social media would create a huge damage. And we should use it, we should get it on our side, we should work together with them, and we should try to avoid this misinformation. And another topic is, our industry, there are indications meanwhile that we are getting this social conspiracy theory topic, that we are part of this conspiracy.
We are part of this conspiracy. We are part of this conspiracy. We need to, no. Listen. Why are you deciding anything? I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to stop it there. This, we've already gone a little over a half an hour. The next one's probably going to be over an hour because there's still about 23 minutes left in this. But listen, you want to know who these people are? Invisible Empire and New World Order Define and Shade the Motion Picture. Please, go watch them. They're free. Right here in the documentary playlist section. If you can support me, please do. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, become a member of the Burmese Brigade, post on social media, $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Also got this Rockfin. It looks like Tuesdays are going to be an exclusive live stream at some time period, along with some other heavy hitters on Rockfin. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, first you can follow me. There's a bunch of stuff that's free on here. And if you do want to endorse me for $9.99, you get everybody's content. It's like a Netflix for creators. So guys, we're going to come back to Event 201. We're going to talk about all the misinformation, the disinformation, internet down, and wrap it up probably later this evening. We're also going to do a, we're also going to do a actual coronavirus update sometime today as well. Guys, I love you, and I will see you on the flip side.